255 sub-article 2, it enjoins not only the committees, because if you look at the motion, there were things that the committees were supposed to do and things that government was supposed to do, independent commissions were supposed to do, and even holders of independent offices. And by way of example, Honorable Speaker, the very first resolution there is that we needed an apology from the National Police Service for all the deaths from peaceful protests. So there is an expectation that the National Police Service also needed to respond to us. There is a question of compensation, and the wording of the motion is compensation from the national government for victims of police brutality. Then, of course, there was the question of amnesty for prosecutions, which was also an expectation of the National Police Service, and a withdrawal of the cases from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. In fact, our standing orders enjoin even those independent offices to be able to implement the resolutions of this House. I was in Kisumu over the weekend, and one of those young people was telling me that they are still facing cases in court. Honorable Speaker, it is also not lost on us that there continue to be complaints of abductions by unknown people suspected to be security officers across the country. Even as we speak, there is a famous case of a lady called Maverick Aoko. Yes, Maverick Aoko, who has been missing for a few days. So, Honorable Speaker, I would also want us as a Senate to ask those independent offices, the responsible or relevant cabinet secretary, in line with Standing Order 255-2, so that they also brief this House on how far we have gone in terms of implementations of the resolutions of this House. I have personally taken time to explain to especially my leader of majority, the leader of majority of this House, who's now my friend, Honorable Speaker, that for us in the opposition, Honorable Speaker, if these resolutions are actually implemented, we will have an easier time even having tea with the majority leader. And he knows this. He was, Honorable Speaker, I'm being told the majority leader was distracted. I have taken time, Honorable Speaker, because, you know, we are in a period of people trying to understand what makes some of us tick, the members of the opposition, members of government. I have explained to the majority leader that for us in the opposition, and especially for ODM, for which I'm the Secretary General, if these issues that we passed here on apologies and compensation for victims and an end to abductions of people in this country are actually implemented, he will have an easier time calling me for coffee to discuss other things, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, I would plead with you, Honorable Speaker, just like you have directed our committees to respond, all these independent offices and government itself must also tell us why it has taken this long, 60 days later, and we don't see any movement in terms of implementation of these resolutions. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the matter of social media clips, Mr. Speaker, I just want to let us know, as a media practitioner, that in this day and age, any institution that does not embrace social media as part of their day-to-day transactions, then may not be doing very, very well. I believe that then the Senate must have, or Parliament must have, an alternative media policy that will guide how to interact with social media platforms. The Speaker, on the more substantive issue about your communication, I want to thank you for it. And I will say two things. One, Mr. Speaker, remember we sat and made those resolutions at a time that this country was actually at the brink of burning. It was terrible. And you remember we prided ourselves as a Senate, as the House of Leadership that sat through the crisis when the lower house took off and went to hide themselves. The Speaker, I would have expected, as a leader in this country, that these resolutions would be a lot more binding to not just the committees of the Senate, but to all the other institutions that were mentioned and to which then commitments were given. To begin with the police service, Mr. Speaker. In fact, my expectation was that because we got a new IG after the fact, I would have expected that the first call of duty for him would have been to apologize to Kenyans on behalf of the crisis that we went through. Now, that has not happened, Mr. Speaker, and because I still believe that these resolutions are still binding, as you have required, Mr. Speaker, of the committees to give us an updated report, which I believe Senator Cheruiyot was talking about standing order number 56, when chairmen are bringing their updates, they should do it between now and Thursday. The Speaker, I would urge you to consider requiring, I don't know through which means, but requiring the other institutions of government, the police service, the Ministry of Health, to just appear before a committee of the whole, so that, Mr. Speaker, they can brief this nation on how far they have gone with the implementation of these resolutions. Mr. Speaker, lastly, we woke up this morning to a very scary media report on how police officers are accessing private communication through mobile phones and using that communication, as Speaker, to track down people for abduction. Mr. Speaker, that is a very serious matter, and it forms the basis of one of the resolutions that we made at that time. Mr. Speaker, we must remind the Inspector General of Police that the right to privacy is a Chapter 4 right under the Constitution. Article 31 of the Constitution requires that the privacy of communication for every member of society must never be infringed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if that report is true, because we have not verified it, if that information is true, Mr. Speaker, it is more reason that this House must summon the Inspector General of Police to come and explain to Kenyans why they are tracking down Kenyans and abducting them using mobile phones. Lastly, this is also a call to order for a private institution, Mr. Speaker, one that we respect, one which we have built with our own money and commitment. Safaricom must be put to order. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be that they are going to misuse their monopoly to aid the police to break the law. Mr. Speaker, this House must stand firm and say no to infringement of people's privacy. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Senators. Let us make progress in this matter. Allow me to take the clarification sought by